Hey everybody, welcome to Poker with Kids, episode number 40. Can you believe it has been 40 episodes already? This time looking at the recently completed APT Brisbane series. This was a huge series over 6 days held at Eaton's Hill Hotel.
Here's the setup at Eaton's Hill. There's the feature table, which is an RFID table. Now we're scrolling around or looking around the main ballroom area. The vast majority of the big events were held there. Some of the smaller events were held up the back of the room. And as we pan up to the upper level, we're now on the mezzanine level. And over here was where they had, again, some of the smaller events, 100 to 150 players. This is the marquee outside where they had most of the satellite or seat chase events, as they call them. They may have had one or two smaller events, but I think they managed to get them all in indoor areas this time around. This is a view from outside the Hills room, looking back over at the marquee in the main ballroom. This is the entrance to the Hills area and the Hills room itself, where the celebrity event and the mega stack were played, amongst other things.
The series guarantee, or I don't think they actually had a guarantee, they actually made it an estimate for the prize pool for the series was around, I think it was a 1 million estimate. This time they didn't make guarantees on prize pools because of all the issues with COVID and travel. There were issues beforehand with players from Sydney travelling up, which affected some of the events. The celebrity event was the most obvious one affected, that some of the celebrity players had to be changed at the last minute. And obviously players from Sydney weren't able to get up unless they'd came up in quarantine beforehand and things like that. So you essentially had one part of the market effectively locked out of the tournament. So having said that, 6 days of poker was planned, 24 events, I believe. I managed to get up there for 4 events. Got there over 3 days, 3 of the 6 days, played in 4 events. We'll get to how I did in a little bit. But yeah, this was an enormous series. All sorts of records were smashed. They had, I believe, their biggest prize pool ever for an event with the Goliath, which was a $2,500 buy-in, and I think the prize pool was somewhere around 400,000 just for that one event. They almost got to 1,000 runners for the main event. They had 4 day one flights. I think the final numbers were 974, so an enormous event. Every other event was packed out. I think I managed, I think the smallest event they had was the short deck, and that had, I think, 93. But yeah, every other event, I think, had triple figures. So huge event for what's essentially just a local, an extension of pub poker, effectively, a pub poker series. Reasons for that, I think the poker scene up here in Queensland is, especially outside the casino, with the pub poker and the variety of leagues that they have up here, the scene up here is huge. There's all sorts of series going on. After this one, the APT that just finished, next month there's a big series. Technically, I guess there's 2 from APL. They've got one up in Townsville. The following week, they've got one on the Gold Coast at Southport Sharks. At the end of February, there's also a check race poker series at Acacia Ridge. And then in March, you've got the second APT, which is again running at Southport Sharks on the Gold Coast. So 3 big series in the next couple of months as well, coming up in addition to this one. Not quite as big, obviously, as the one that they've just had at Brisbane, being over 6 days. The other ones are a bit shorter, over 2, 3, or 4 days, but they'll still attract big numbers. And I think things like the Aussie Millions being postponed with Crown and the issues they've been having in Victoria, with the relatively recent outbreaks in Sydney and how Sydney's been sort of defined as a hotspot, and interstate travel's been a bit compromised. Really makes for interesting times, but having said that, people have just turned out and going like, we want some live poker, and live poker they've got. So the setup at Eaton's Hill actually had four playing areas. There was the main ballroom downstairs, where they had things like the main event and a lot of their big-ish in terms of numbers events. There's also a small upstairs area, mezzanine level, on the ballroom. That's where they had the short deck. They also played some other smaller events where they were looking at fields 100, 150 or less. They again set up the marquee. If you go back a couple of videos, the last APT Brisbane that they had, I filmed there from just outside the marquee. So they had the marquee set up again, mostly for satellite events. I believe they might have had one or two of the smaller events there, but as far as possible, I think they tried to keep those to an indoor venue. And they also had the Hills Room, which is over in the accommodation part of the hotel, a separate building altogether. That's where they held things like the vast majority of the celebrity tournament. We'll get back to that in a minute. I also played the King's Mega Stack over there, and there were some other events going on there during the 6 days. So a really good setup. Makes for really nice venue, really well set out, plenty of staff on hand. For the most part, dealing with any issues that might have come up. I'll get to again some of the issues that they did have shortly, but overall, a really well run series, and again to generate prize pools in excess of $1.5 million for a series where the vast majority of buy-ins are under $200 or less. Yes, they do have a few bigger events that are $1,200, $2,500, that type of thing, but they're at the most, it's only going to contribute, say, half to the prize pool. So you're still looking at sort of the regular sort of rank and file players making up a decent chunk of that $1.5 million prize pool.
With all the COVID stuff in place, it was a mask-on series, at least for the start of the event. And these are the banners that they had at the registration desk explaining the registration process with the app, which is a nice feature that they'd added.
Before I get to how I went during the series, I just want to quickly run through how the series ran overall and some of the issues that they did have. I think they've definitely improved their setup with their registration. Maybe I just turned up at the right times. Actually turned up a little bit late for pretty much every tournament. Just the traffic trying to get up from the Gold Coast up to Brisbane. It's sort of an hour or so drive from where I was, and then once you add traffic and roadworks and things like that. I think the one event that I actually registered early for was the Omaha, where I was already on the site. It was the second one I'd played for the day. But anytime I sort of got there for the first event, I was always anywhere from sort of 10 minutes to almost an hour after start time. So yes, the registration process seemed to be a lot smoother. They checked at registration, make sure that you did have the app. They had two big display banners which explained how the process was for registration. They didn't have that last time, and you were sort of fumbling to figure out which button you press on the app. How do you register an event, because it wasn't intuitive. The process was that you had to actually add the voucher for the event first, which gave you the credit to then be able to register. So the obvious thing that you sort of go is you press the register button and you sort of go, oh look, I can't go anywhere unless I press the register button. Again, that was all explained with the display banner. So that was all explained. They didn't need to have 3 or 4 staff standing around the printout machines, sort of going, oh, how do you scan the QR code on your phone? How do you input your voucher? How do you register the process? That was all effectively taken care of by one staff member keeping an eye on things, and the display banner explaining the process. So that was again a big improvement. One thing that they had tried in the past in terms of seating was having the TDs with tablets or iPads and trying to get an exact picture of where everybody was, which great for tracking exactly where everybody was. But the problem was it effectively made it overly labour intensive. So, and if there was an issue with somebody busting out and taking the wrong sitting card, or taking the sitting card with them and not leaving it at the table, or things like that, or they didn't pick up a sitting card in a timely manner. You had situations where you had players going to seats and then they get to the table and they'd be, hang on a minute, the seat that's supposed to be my seat is already taken with somebody, because somebody moved seats or all sorts of issues, and that really slowed down the process of breaking tables. They've got rid of that this time, and they basically just did a normal table break. You get your table cards. When they've got enough to break a table, they just distribute them to the players on the table that they're breaking, then they go find their way to the new table and they sit down. So that was much more efficient. There were times when staff sort of seemed to be a bit slow with picking up cards and things like that. Again, the issue with not having dealers at tables for the smaller events means that you don't have the obvious, like you would in a dealer run event or a casino run event, where if there is a bust out, you've got the dealer shouting out, seat open, holding up the card, and then your TD or supervisor comes around and picks up the card, so you've got that in a timely manner. Self-dealt, you don't sort of have that as much. Sometimes you have players calling out, sometimes you have a player taking their card over to the TD. Sometimes they'll just leave it at the table, and players may or may not say something at the table. So again, that can be a bit of a problem, but as I said, by eliminating that sort of micromanaging system, it seemed to work a bit quicker. For some events with the COVID restrictions, there was a couple of little issues that came up there. The biggest one was actually with the celebrity tournament. I didn't actually play in the celebrity tournament, but they had that set up in the Hills room, which is over in the accommodation section of the hotel, with the COVID restrictions and the is it 2 meters per person or 4 square meters per person. They had capped the event at 150. What they then did, because that evening's flight of the main event was actually smaller than they were expecting, they had a lot of room in the ballroom. They'd already registered a whole bunch of alternates, and what they decided to do was to seat the alternates in the main ballroom, meaning that they were playing in the tournament, but the celebrities that were playing in the tournament for the Celebrity Bounty event were all over in the Hills room in the accommodation section of the hotel. So effectively, you played in the Celebrity Bounty tournament, didn't see any celebrities, didn't get a chance to knock out any celebrities because they're all in the other room in another part of the hotel. That was a minor issue. In particular, I know one player that came to, after they busted out of that tournament, they came to the short deck tournament, and they were complaining that they registered long in advance. They'd registered 3 or 4 weeks before the tournament had started. They actually turned up early to print their ticket, but they hadn't opened registrations or printing tickets for the event. By the time they came back later, the initial 150 had already locked out. So he got put as an alternate and ended up getting seated in the ballroom. So his complaint was, well, what's the point in registering early or turning up early if I've done everything right and yet I still don't get into the main room with the celebrities where I've got the opportunity to, pick up some celebrity bounties, or, say I've played with Joe Hashem or Jimmy Cassidy or whoever else they had as their, Jeff Horn, any of the other celebrities that they had there. You can say, hey, I played with them, I knocked out at, this person, had a good time, whatever. This one was just effectively playing in a bounty tournament in a room with random people. So definitely a different experience from that. And I think quite rightly he'd be a little bit upset saying, look, he did everything right, he registered early, he turned up early. So it wasn't about when you registered, it was about when you printed the ticket. So he said, look, if I knew it was about when I printed the ticket, I would have just turned up as soon as printing tickets was open, and I would have printed my ticket, and I would have been one of the first, 20 people to print my ticket, and then I could have, gone and done something for an hour or two and come back and when the tournament was ready to start. So that was one issue that they did have there with the celebrity tournament. Apart from that, not too many issues. The Omaha had the usual issue of players not knowing how to calculate a pot size raise and things like that. And I know by the time we got to the tournament, I was personally feeling a bit tired. So a lot of times they just went, look, this is how you do it. Or things like if they were talking about opening raises and stuff like that, I was like, it's 7 times a small blind. If you want to repot, it's 12 times a big blind and stuff like that. And I think at that time it was like 800, 1600 blinds. And I was just like, meant to them just like, you figure out 7 times 8, you figure out 12 times 16 and stuff like that. I mean, obviously I could do it, but at the time I was just tired and committed. So like, this is how you figure it out. You do the maths, I'll tell you how to figure it out. And then some other players are doing the whole, well, okay, if we put in the 1600 and then we count up all what's in the pot and things like that. So yeah, that slowed down the event with 15-minute levels. It really meant that you only got 4 or 5 hands in per orbit. If you had a particular orbit where you had some that were taken down pre-flop without any flop action or anything like that, you might have been able to get a whole round or close to a whole round of the table in per level, but really it was a very fast structure. Not that that's necessarily a bad thing. I mean, it was the last event for the tournament, but that was one issue that they had with that event. Also a minor one as well, especially when you have the player of the series going, especially towards the end of it, you had a few players that were in the race for the player of the series. And I think it was a $12,500 first prize, so definitely worth the effort. But you then had a lot of people, or not a lot, but 3 or 4 players doing I'm going to play every single event that I can to get points. If they make the money, they get more points and things like that. So they were rushing around between tables. They play a hand, fold, run to the next event that's on the other side of the room, or they'd run upstairs to the different level and things like that. So it was a little bit chaotic for a few players. I'm going to try and grab the footage. I know Gigi at one point, she's one of the people doing the media for the APT. Sort of at one point chased Mike Maddox sort of up the stairs, down the stairs, across the floor, and stuff like that. And she's sort of hurriedly following with a camera in tow and stuff like that. I'll try and put a little bit of that footage in, but yeah, that made it interesting for some of those players chasing player of the series. But yeah, let's get to my tournaments, how I went, and a couple of my hands that might actually be worth looking at. So the first one I played in was the short deck event on the Tuesday night. I think they ended up with 93 runners. Again, reasonable tournament. 93 is a pretty good turnout for a non-Hold'em event, or a not regular Hold'em event anyway. A lot of people seem a bit intimidated or sort of put off by things being a little bit different. Again, the usual kind of thing happened. They played the tournament a little bit differently from how they had previously. This time they actually played it in I suppose you'd say the traditional sense of short deck, where they actually had all players ante with a button, effectively double ante. So I think it might have started off as 100, 200. So every player anteed 100. You had the button anteing 200. Your first, it was either obviously call the 200 with your 100, so it was an additional 100 to call, or your raise had to be to double that, which was up to 400. That confused a few players for whatever reason, because everybody wants to min raise for, I don't know why. Having said that, given that you did have everybody anteing, again, that slowed down the event a little bit, but overall people got used to it pretty quickly, and it ran well as an event. Personally, I was in it for a while. Ended up getting down to the final, I think 5 or so tables. Ended up finishing around 30th. So an okay result, but not a money, not in the money result. Actually, as it turned out, the player that actually ended up winning it, Jonathan, I don't want to try and butcher his name, but he ended up actually winning the Player of the Year. Sorry, not the Player of the Year, Player of the Series. He ended up having a really good series, and obviously took out that Player of the Series award at the end of it. So that was my first event on the Tuesday night. Next event I went up for was on the Thursday night. Event number 12 for the 6 Max Shootout. Last time I played in the event at Eaton's Hill, I managed to win my first table and get through to the money and play that played for the final few tables that obviously didn't make the final table there. This time, I think they had around, I don't know the exact numbers, I think it was around 150, it might have been a little bit over 150, so a pretty big event. Ended up playing, obviously, the first table, they were all 6 max. Played reasonably, got off to a bit of a slow start, but picked up a few hands towards the middle of the event. Eventually ended up getting down to heads up. With a little bit of a chip disadvantage, but not too much. I think there was 120,000 in play, and I had around about 45, 50-ish to start. So not quite, somewhere between 1-1 and 2-1, but so a little bit of a chip disadvantage, but not too much of a chip disadvantage. And actually turned out that we ended up playing heads up for would have been over an hour. Would have been at least 4 levels, which is almost as long as the other players in total. Ultimately, my bust out hand was a bit of an interesting one. We'll get to that shortly, but yeah. Overall, again, I really like the format with the 6 max and the shootout, knowing that when you win if you can win your first table, you're in the money. And obviously you play down to bigger money in the second round of the event. As it turned out, the guy that I was heads up with ended up coming 5th overall. So he did reasonably well. It's one of those ones where what might have been. But that's just how things go sometimes. Really bust out hand for the 6 max shootout. I think by this stage, blinds were 2,000 or 4,000. Again, I said we started with 120,000 in total on the table, 20k start stack. And my opponent was doing something that he had done for a little bit, and I really didn't take enough advantage of it. When he was the dealer, there were a lot of times when he basically just complete blind without even looking at his cards. I've looked down at my hand, 5-7 offsuit, knuckled the table, taken a flop. So we've got 8,000 in the pot, and we saw a flop of, over here, 258. So I've picked up middle pair, not a fantastic kicker, but a pair heads up is a pair heads up. I decided to check the flop, and my opponent relatively quickly checked back. The turn was a 7. So now, if I wasn't going to bet the flop, I was definitely going to bet the turn. I think I bet 5k into the 8k-ish pot. My opponent thought for a little bit and called. Set it off to the river. And the river was an offsuit jack. Again, there wasn't any flush out there, but I'm thinking 2 pair. Yes, there are a few straights that get there that can beat me. You're looking at, like 6, 9, 9, 10, things like that. But apart from that, maybe I could be beaten by like a Jack 8, Jack 7, something like that. But 2 pair, I think at this stage, I had probably around about 30k, maybe a little bit more left. So I shoved, and of course my opponent snap calls and rolls over the old 10-9 offsuit for the nut straight. So that was my bust out hand for the 6 max shootout. There was only one other time when I was actually all in, ended up check shoving on a flop of ace queen 10 with ace 4 offsuit. My opponent sort of tanked for a while and eventually made the call with ace 6 and we chopped. But yeah, really fun event to play in, and yeah, unfortunately you just end up with a situation like this, a relative cooler in heads up, which meant that didn't get my way, and I was out the door, and my opponent was on to round number 2. My event number 3 was on the Sunday on the final day for the Kings Mega Stack, which also included a little card guard. Just sat there, but good to get a little souvenir of the event. That one was played over in the Hills room, over in the accommodation section of the hotel. Really nice setup with the room there. By that stage, the COVID restrictions actually relaxed, so they had the tables as 10 max rather than 8 or 6 max that they had with some of the earlier events. By that stage, you didn't have to wear a mask, whereas in the earlier events, everyone had to wear a mask. Again, there are issues created with that, but that's a completely separate issue. Again, ultimately played pretty well in the event. Had a few spots that sort of went my way or didn't go my way. I think maybe I was a little bit, I suppose, not active enough in terms of getting involved in hands, and eventually ended up getting a little bit short and ended up on the wrong side of what was close to a coin flip. Ended up with getting with pocket threes against King 10, and the guy had a king, so it is what it is. But the fact that I was getting that short today, and the blinds were getting that quick, I think it was 15-minute level. So again, it was a bit of a turbo-ish format, but being Hold'em, at least you got through some hands a bit quicker than the Omaha. Having said that, I think by the time we actually got to my bust out hand, I was down to like 4 big blinds or something like that. Yes, it was a bit of a turbo structure, and yes, you had a few people just making some really loose calls and things like that, or hitting their gut shots that they needed and things like that. So there always was a bit of a luck for some players, but as it seems with a lot of my events, I don't quite get that sort of stuff happening too much. Every now and again, I get the things working my way, but for the most part, it's just okay. If I get any good, maybe it will hold. Maybe I can hold. If I don't get any, if I don't get it in good, there's a small chance that I might defy the odds. But for the most part, it seems like if I get it in bad, then I lose the hand, and I get any good, it's at the very least it's a sweat to see if I can win or not. But anyway, in that one, I think they had 193 runners in total. Finished around about 45th. So again, close to the money, but not quite close enough. And then to finish up with that one, I ended up busting out. I think it was around about 5:15, and the final event, the pot limit Omaha, started at 5:30. So I went, well, I might as well hang around for that, play the Omaha. It was only been revised for the first 8 levels, so that had some tables that were a little bit on the crazy side. At one point, I think the table next to me, they announced that there were 6 players all in. I think it was be on the flop or pre-flop. But they're all sort of standing up, going, "Oh, I need this card or this card or whatever to win." But for the most part, I had a relatively tame table without too many people going crazy. We did have the one guy who, this is his first time playing Omaha, and he was really, especially at one hand, early on, opponent had shoved on the river, and he was deciding what to do. It was, a bet of like 8,800 into a pot of around, 12,000 or something like that, and it was almost all these chips to call. I think the board was something like 3-3, 7, 10, 9 or something like that, and he was in there with 3-7. So he'd actually, I think the board came out 3-3, 10, 7. So he'd flop trips and turned the full house, but it was bottom full house. So here he was, hemming and hawing and trying to decide, do I call, do I not call? He had his mate doing his beforehand that, he said, look, if there's a full house out there, chances are someone's probably got it, or if you want to flush, you want to have the nut flush and that kind of thing. So he's sort of like, he's sitting there, I can't believe I'm thinking of laying this down and stuff like that. And there was another player that, given that we had the 15-minute levels, he was, you tell he knew what he was doing. He was one of the few players who could actually calculate a pot size raise. And he played pretty quickly, but yeah, he was sort of getting frustrated. At some point, he's going, look, mate, you've already had about 3 or 4 minutes for the decision. Decide in the next 20 seconds, or or just muck your hand, kind of thing. Eventually, the guy ended up calling, and the player who had shoved only had trip threes without actually making a full house. So, but having said that one street took about 3 or 4 minutes. So that was a decent chunk of a level and stuff like that. So that was the turbo part of it. Again, the whole players that aren't familiar with the game, slowing it down. But I guess that's sort of what you expect. But also at the same time, it's part of the reason why you want to enter an event that that's where you're, you know, having a bit of a better understanding of the game. You've got an advantage over the players that are playing it for the first time and things like that. A little bit later on, we had an English guy. This is towards the end of the rebuy period. He was playing very. I'm just going to look. I get my stack in hoping, and he was DAK won a lot of the sort of the random flips with 4 cards and built up a stack. They had there was a muck up with their system where they sent us on a break early when it wasn't supposed to be a break. So they came back. Turned out to be probably about a 10-minute break, and then they came back. We played like 1.5 levels, and they had the real 10-minute break and things like that, which was the end of the rebuy period. Came back after the rebuy period. The English guy that had been sort of a bit crazy beforehand then decided that, okay, he was going to make a still play loose-ish after the break when the rebuys are over. Lost a big pot. Can't remember exactly what happened in the big pot that he lost, but it was the end where he had obviously he had a reasonable hand, but his opponent had a better hand. And then he decided that he was basically going into punt mode with 84 cards. And I'll get to the hand in a minute, but yeah, I faced the dilemma where this other player was involved, especially with another tournament that he wanted to go to. So he was basically saying, "Look, he basically announced to the table, I'm going to play, I'm going to play blind," and that was one complication that I took it the wrong way. I misplayed the hand, and it didn't go well for me. But and this is my bust out hand from the Omaha event. By this stage, I was down to I think about 19,000. The blinds at 1-2, and I was under the gun. Looked out at a reasonable Omaha starting hand, king at 8-6. Obviously got a pair of kings. I've got a suit with a king 8. Obviously you prefer ace high and a suit, but king high is the next best option. 6-8 gives you potential for making straights, making 2 pairs. So getting short, I was definitely going to run with the hand. The dilemma is how to then play the hand. Knowing that over in this spot, we had the mad English guy who had lost the hand before, and in between while the cards are being dealt for this hand, said, I'm going to go upstairs and I'm going to go and play the, I think it was the 6-max shootout or shot clock or something, a 6-max shot clock event that was on, again, the same venue on the next level. So he's announced this beforehand. He basically played the previous hand without looking at his cards. So you knew that he was going to raise when it got to him. So the dilemma was what to do sitting under the gun. Do I actually just do the standard pot size raise and make it 7k, get him to shove, and I think that would have knocked out the field, and then I could have called. And I think if I played the hand that way, I think I wouldn't be telling you this story, and I still would have been in the event longer than I was. As it turned out, I decided to do the old under the gun limp. So the guy that's playing the 4 random cards has went, okay, I'm going to make it raise the pot. So he's made it 9,000 with I think just over 10k behind. It's folded around to the guy in the cutoff. This is the guy who actually I think won the tag teams event. Knowing that this guy was playing 4 random cards, he's decided to make the call with his hand. We'll have a look at his hand in a minute, but I think if it was potted and shoved before it got to him, he would have played the hand very differently, would have got out of the way. Folded back around to me. I've shoved. Random English guy has shoved. I think we're both pretty close in chip, so it's around 20k. So it's around about 11k for this guy to call. He's getting a pretty good price on his money. He had us both just covered, so he decided to call. We've rolled over our hands. Obviously, this is all now in the middle. Pretty sizable pot. English guys rolled over four races. To be honest, I don't even remember what the exact cards were that he had, but he played the hand blind. He had 4 random cards. There wasn't a pair in his hand. And yeah, Kings would have held up against his random hand based on the run out. And this guy had Ace 223, which even not bad for a Omaha high low, but for an Omaha high hand, not the best. He's got to the point where when he's making decisions, he's gone, oh well, I guess I'll just play it a better call. Again, once he's put in the 9K, I can understand him making the decision, but I think if it was effectively an all-in before it got to him, I think he's folding that hand. And again, it plays very differently. But again, that's the dilemma of poker. And of course, with the run out, we have the dreaded ace, which I think came on the flop. And yeah, I think I might have made a pair of 6s or 8s or something like that. But yeah, I had a pair of kings by the end. The other guy had a pair of aces, and the English guy had a pair of, I don't even think he made a pair. Yeah, this guy ended up scooping. I was out of the tournament, and yeah, that was my the end of my PLO event, unfortunately. So again, I think if I played that differently, different result, I think I'd double up against the English guy that wanted to go to the other tournament. How I played it, misplayed it. I guess trying to get more value. I mean, I did create a bigger pot, but again, 3 opponents or 2 opponents is much more difficult to win rather than 1 opponent. So it might have been better to put in the initial raise, get the English guy to shove, and then just go heads up with against his 4 random cards rather than having the potential to bring in another player, which obviously cost me in the tournament for me. But overall, good tournament, good event. Again, another well-run series by APT. As I said, the next one for APT is in March at Southport Sharks. I think it's a 4-day series that they're running there, so not quite as big, not as many events. But again, Southport Sharks are a really nice venue, a lot closer to me. They don't have to worry about the hour drive and quite as much traffic. So the issues with getting there a bit late shouldn't be a problem. But yeah, overall, really well run, a really well run series. Just like you'd expect from APT. Good to see some familiar faces. Also good to see Mike Maddox, who you might remember from a bit over a year ago with the Vlogging in Paradise series that I was involved in, that Andrew Nemi and Jeff Gross ran with the PokerStars with PCA back when live poker was running everywhere. How they had those Platinum Pass giveaways. Mike Maddox got down. He was one of the finalists. He played in this series. I think he picked up the PLO High Roller title. Ended up finishing 2nd overall in the Player of the Series. So well done to Mike. I think he's heading back to Canada. I think he said in the next few months. He actually came up from Melbourne for the series. But yeah, well done to Mike for his series. Had some really good results, and well done on getting 2nd in the series. But that's going to wrap up vlog number 40 for Poker with Kids. If you liked the video, thumbs up. Feel free to subscribe to the channel. One day I might get to 100 subscribers. But yeah, thanks for watching, and hope to see you again on another video soon.